Hello, fellow Liberians and people in radio or TV land. We are coming to you through the Kaki Dialogue. The Kaki's Dialogue is the Kamara Abdullah Kamara Intellectual Dialogue. For short, we call it the Kaki's Dialogue. And today we come to you in this brief podcast to raise a very important issue. I came across a video on Facebook uh, like yesterday, and I thought that it's very important for us to ponder the question or the issue that was raised in the video by the young gentleman. And that issue concerned Liberia and how Liberia is positioned before the rest of the world. Mind you, I am a human rights advocate and I come from the background of law. And so therefore I take this a little serious, and it is important that we have clarification on this question. Shortly, I'm going to play the video for you. Let me make sure I do some housekeeping that you can all try to follow as we go through. But let me remind you that beginning February, we are going to be here with what we refer to as a progressive diary, and you are going to be listening to the likes of Tipote, Dr. H. Boyma Famule, Ambassador Drew Mason, Ambassador Komene B. Wise, and you're going to be listening to Dr. George Klekie and the rest of our senior progressive actors who were very instrumental in the 70s, 80s, and 90s in the transformation of a Liberian society. You're going to be listening to Ezekiel Pajibo, you're going to be listening to James Yasia, and you're going to be listening to Edwin Jua, and you're also going to be listening to D. Kankalo, Milton Tiaji, and the rest of the guys from the UPPN and UPP PAL-N. And this is something that we're going to be bringing to you on in February, beginning February, and we are going to be broadcasting to you what we refer to as a progressive diaries. To it is best for you if you like and subscribe. As we move through, you can subscribe on our YouTube page, and you can also subscribe on our Facebook page. This broadcast right now is going to be aired both on YouTube and Facebook. You can search for Vote 24 TV. If you want to make it easier to find it, you have to maybe put Liberia, Vote 24 TV Liberia, and it'll be easier for you to find it on YouTube. And you can just subscribe and keep the number going up, because this television and radio station is definitely going to bring back those educative and informative tradition that we once have when we refer to the media institutions in Liberia. There are traditional media institutions in Liberia that still do give you credible information and balance with journalistic ethics. We want to be in the middle of making sure that we are not on the extreme and we are bringing you balanced information. This station, Vote 24 TV, has to be representative of the character, especially the Kaki's Dialogue. It has to be representative of the character of Kamara Abdullah Kamara, who was not seen in a form as a person who will readily engage problems or issue through direct confrontation at the first instance. He was very methodical, and he was also very strategic in how he engages. But Kamara Abdullah Kamara, peace be to his ashes. We want to make sure that his memory lives on for eternity, and that is why we want to give back to the Liberian people what intellectual engagement really means. But like I said, Vote 24 TV is going to be bringing you the Progressive Diary very soon, and you can like and subscribe our pages, our YouTube page, and our Facebook page as well. I'll be back with this fascinating monologue, and you will understand why I want to delve into that particular issue once I show you the video. It's very concerning, so stay tuned. Thank you very much. Welcome, my Liberian people. Welcome to everyone who's listening to our voice at this moment. It is certainly a very beautiful day, and we hope that you wake up with something very wonderful to listen to. And I urge you to listen to this very keenly as we move through. And I'll just give a little tip on what we think about this particular issue. Is an issue that has been within the legal corridor for a very long time, but I don't think that we have adequately addressed this issue at any given point in time. But this is something that we need to actually give consideration to. So let me play the video, and you're going to listen to it, and then I'll come back. Okay, let's play.
You must be black to get citizenship in Liberia. Liberia is the only country where citizenship is based strictly on race. If you are not black, you cannot get citizenship in Liberia, even if you are born there. If you are married to a Liberian but not black, you cannot get citizenship in Liberia. If you're not black, you cannot own land in Liberia. At least one of your parents has to be black to get citizenship in Liberia. Follow for more. You must be black to get citizenship in Liberia. Liberia is the only country where citizenship is based strictly on race. If you are not black, you cannot get citizenship in Liberia, even if you're born there. If you're married to a Liberian but not black, you cannot get citizenship in Liberia. If you're not black, you cannot own land in Liberia. At least one of your parents has to be black to get citizenship in Liberia. Follow.
So this is a narrative that has been spinning for a very long time in the corridor of politics and law, or in society, in Liberia in general. And this narrative is not wholly truth. This narrative is not wholly the truth. The Constitution did not say in any way that you have to be black to be citizen of Liberia. What the Constitution made mention of, is that you have to be a person of Negro descent. You have to be a person of Negro descent. So Negro descent cannot be reduced to just being black. It cannot be reduced to just being black when say you should be of Negro descent. So the question is he or the rest of the other people who carry this narrative, are they saying the truth? That's a question that we have to be able to answer, and obviously it is not. A constitutional argument for universal harmony is what is portrayed in that constitution requiring Negro descent. What is portrayed in the requirement by the Constitution for a person to be Negro descent to become citizen is an argument for universal harmony. Here's the thing. The traditional reading of the Negro descent clause in the Constitution assumes exclusion. Everybody would think that it means exclusion. But this argument for universal harmony proceeds from a different premise. That the clause's largest constitutional strength lies not in exclusion. The clause does not try to exclude, but in universal inclusion, grounded in shared human origin. Now, we always want to point to the historicity of the clause. That the blacks were being dehumanized. And the major issue was that, why are we dehumanized? We are all equal, and we should be treated equal before the law. The belief that all human beings, whether black or white, should be equal or are equal by nature, and therefore should be equally treated before the law. That was the foundation of the argument. The question, therefore, is not who is excluded, but what example Liberia is constitutionally positioned to offer the world. What can Liberia offer the world as a constitutional democracy? The clause as a statement of human origin, not hierarchy. Liberia can offer that to the world. That our requirement in the Constitution for people of Negro descent to become citizens, that only people of Negro descent can become citizens, is merely a clause that states the truth of human origin and does not intend to reinvent hierarchy, as was in the case of slavery that were suffered by our people. So our people were not trying to reintroduce human hierarchy because they knew that it was wrong to do so. So in their thinking, it would not be proper to rearrange human hierarchy. Historically, the word Negro emerged as a descriptor of African origin. Modern science now confirms what history only intuited. Modern science have confirmed what history positioned us to say. So when we look back and see what was written in the Constitution, we can only appreciate our ancestors for being forward or perspective in their thoughts. Our ancestors were very, very perspective in their thoughts. They did us a very interesting constitution. And to the extent that it becomes very difficult for us to understand the nuances of the provision of the Constitution, it's at this point that scholars should consider actually looking at that clause and see what the beauty of the thinking of our ancestors, the pioneers. Modern science have confirmed that Africa is the birthplace of humanity. That is true. It is not debatable. Africa is the birthplace of humanity. Modern science and scientists have agreed unanimously that Africa is the birthplace of humanity. So therefore, if Africa is the cradle of humanity, then African ancestry is not sectional. It is universal. And that is something that Liberians need to understand. That our African ancestry does not belong to those of us we refer to as African alone. We are Africans, yes, but other people have ancestral lineage to Africa by definition of the fact that humanity came from Africa, and Africa is the cradle of humanity. The best birthplace of humanity is Africa. Africa is the cradle of humanity. And therefore, African ancestry cannot be sectional. It is universal. It belongs to everyone. And if that is true, and of course it is, then Negro descent, not black, Negro descent is no longer a boundary. Our Constitution did not say black. You have to be black. Because black is easy to detect. You just look at the phenotype and you be able to ascertain, oh, this person is black, this person is white. But the Constitution evaded that and said Negro descent. Our people were clever enough not to mention black. They could have done so, but they didn't. Negro descent is no longer a boundary because of science. Science has erased the issue of Negro descent as being a boundary. There is nowhere historically or legally that says Negro descent is defined as black. There's no legal paper to that respect interpreting the Constitution of Liberia in any way. And similarly, we have not been able to define what Negro descent is in any of our legal papers. So Negro descent that once appeared as difference is revealed as shared origin. It's no longer a difference. It should be seen as shared origin. And referring back to this clip, I just want to play it one more time so that we move along. I'll just play it one more time, and then we can move along.
Follow for more. You must be black to get citizenship in Liberia. Liberia is the only country where citizenship is based strictly on race. If you are not black, you cannot get citizenship in Liberia, even if you are born there. If you are married to a Liberian but not black, you cannot get citizenship in Liberia. If you're not black, you cannot own land in Liberia. At least one of your parents has to be black to get citizenship in Liberia. Follow for more.
So this is the problem. This is the problem. The gentleman takes a constitutional provision and minimizes it, reduce it, simplify it. The provision that say you must be of Negro descent, the gentleman takes it and say you must be black. That is his definition. It is not the definition anywhere in our legal papers or anywhere. It is not the definition. The Constitution says you must be of Negro descent. And we are saying simply that historically the word Negro emerged as a descriptor of African origin. And Africa is the birthplace of humanity. Historically, the word Negro emerged as a descriptor of African origin. And then science confirms that Africa is the birthplace of humanity. Now, the point is, if Africa is the birthplace of humanity, or the cradle of humanity, then African ancestry is universal to everybody. And when the term comes, Negro descent, that term cannot mean a boundary. It can only mean a common denominator to remind the rest of the world that you belong to Africa. You are a descendant of Africa. It is a common denominator. So by the clause, the Negro descent clause, Liberia has a unique position in the world that they're trying to state. And we state that emphatically on behalf of the suffering masses then and now. Most of whom are of African descent. You may refer to them as Black, but the Constitution chose to refer to them as people of African descent. Liberia occupies a singular place in constitutional history. Founded in the intersection of Africa, the Americas, and Europe, Liberia was born of displacement, return, and reconciliation. The Constitution was written into being by people who had lived the violence of racial hierarchy. The white man is superior, the Black man is inferior. It is therefore fitting, not accidental, that Liberia Constitution speaks in the language of origin, not empire. The Constitution does not talk about trying to build a new hierarchy. No. The emphasis is on origin. That is the reason why they use the term Negro descent. Liberia alone is positioned to say to the rest of the world that humanity is one family and its ancestry is Africa. Whether you like it or not, Liberia is in that position to emphatically say that humanity is one, and that is the essence of the Negro descent clause, that humanity is one and the ancestry is Africa. Therefore, the Negro descent clause is a call to humanity. Under this interpretation, the clause does something radical. It asks every person, every Liberian, everybody in the world who tend to visit the Constitution of Liberia in attempt to become a citizen or just for scholarly purpose or whatsoever. It asks everybody coming to Liberia, desirous of citizenship whatsoever, to submit to the truth of shared origin. This is the statement that the Constitution is making. Everybody should submit to the truth of shared origin, to abandon the myth of racial supremacy, and to acknowledge Africa not as periphery, but as beginning. And Liberia is in the right place to do that because Liberia itself is that country which tend to plant her feet in the sand to construct an African democracy, a democracy on the continent of Africa that will strive and survive and prove that the black man was no more inferior to the white man. So Liberia is in the best place to bring everybody to submit to the truth of shared origin, to abandon myth of racial supremacy, and to acknowledge Africa not as a periphery, but as beginning. Citizenship then is not racial entitlement, it is moral consent. We're not seeking to exclude people based on their race. The Constitution is only requiring that people consent to the hard reality that Africa is the cradle of humanity. Every human being came from Africa, originated from Africa, and therefore every human being is a descendant of Africa and is of Negro descent. That is the argument. And that is the argument, that is the position that you have to affirm to become a Liberian. You have to affirm that you recognize a common Negro ancestry, not as stigma, but as origin. Let us remember that conflict thrives on imagined differences. Harmony begins with acknowledging our sameness. By constitutionally affirming Negro descent as universal, Liberia dissolves racial hierarchy. So cleverly, that provision in the Constitution tends to dissolve racial hierarchy. It also neutralizes color as a basis of superiority and places exclusion with ancestral unity. It replaces exclusion with ancestral unity. So, this is what the framework of our Constitution actually saw. This is what they intend to do. We must be mindful of Liberia history and the reason why that clause is in the Constitution. It is not in the Constitution to exclude anybody from becoming citizen of Liberia. But if you become citizen of Liberia, if a white person or Caucasian or whatsoever you may call them, if they attempt to become citizen of Liberia, what they are admitting is simply that Africa is the cradle of humanity and they are of Negro descent. That is the point. That is the point. A clause becomes a tool of reconciliation, not separation. Before the establishment of Liberia, there was a situation that removed the black men from America to come to Liberia and establish Liberia. And that situation was an emphasis on hierarchy. The white man was superior and supreme. So the Negro descent clause is to reconcile that idea. Simply say that all humans are equal and there is no hierarchy. So citizenship is basically allegiance. It's not ancestry. It's allegiance. Like once we acknowledge common descent, what remains relevant is not race, but commitment. So citizenship is not about race. Citizenship in Liberia is not about race. It is about commitment, allegiance to your country, allegiance to the Republic of Liberia. Respect for the Constitution, fulfillment of legal requirement, contribution to the common good, when we look at it this way, race recedes and humanity advances. And this is how we ought to look at the constitutional provision, the clause of Negro descent in the Constitution. Let me play this guy again, and then we can continue with what we are saying.
You're not black, you cannot get citizenship in Liberia. Even if you're born to get citizenship in Liberia. Liberia is the only country where citizenship is based strictly on race. If you're not black, you cannot get citizenship in Liberia, even if you're born there. If you're married to a Liberian but not black, you cannot get citizenship in Liberia. If you're not black, you cannot own land in Liberia. At least one of your parents has to be black to get citizenship.
So before I proceed, this guy is dead wrong. Nowhere in our constitution it says you have to be black to be a citizen in Liberia. It says that you have to be of Negro descent, and to be of Negro descent is one of the easiest things that can be proven. Africa is the cradle of humanity. All human beings have their ancestry to Africa. And the question of Negro, the question of Negro, when you say Negro, descent, when it's a Negro descent, it's a combination of two words. Now we look at the word Negro. Negro emerged earlier on as just a descriptor of people of African origin. So nowhere in the Constitution it mentions black. It says Negro descent, and you have to put these two words together to be able to get a sense of what the Constitution is pointing towards. So Liberia has a moral precedent, sets a moral precedent, and not an exception, like people would like to say. And many times people want to, describe Liberia's constitution as being racist. But that is when you look at the constitution from a very simplistic position and try to minimize the actual intent of the constitution to a racist construct. When you look at Liberia as setting a moral precedent, you are looking at the fact that Liberia does not isolate itself from the world. It invites the world in war. Let the world have an introspection and see within itself whether, in fact, whether or not the white man is superior to the black man. And the answer is no. Any person from any nation may become Liberian, provided they are willing to, one, recognize, share human origin, which is a Negro descent. You must recognize that and agree that because we have a shared human origin, you have an origin in Africa, and by that, you are of Negro descent. You must recognize that. Submit to the Liberian law and participate in its democratic life. Liberia becomes a constitutional mirror, reminding humanity where it began. That simple clause within the Liberian Constitution is like a mirror. It reminds humanity where it begins. You must. Assuming Liberia was the only country in the world, everybody to become citizen will have to affirm that they are of Negro descent. That's the basic thing that Liberia asks for. It just asks for that one. You have to prove that you are of Negro descent. If you want to describe yourself as a white man, and because you're a white man, you are not of Negro descent, you are challenging science, you are challenging history, you are challenging the facts. Liberia only calls you back to the fact. What is the fact? The Constitution is not a racist constitution. It does not require that only black men can become citizen of Liberia. It says people of Negro descent. It brings everybody to submit that they have the origin in Africa. And we have a common African ancestry. The clause Negro descent is meant to be transformative. So it transforms people from the primitive thinking that one race of people is superior over the other race. There is nothing like race. Africans give birth to the world. Everybody in this world has a common human ancestry, and that's Africa. It's the cradle of humanity. So the clause is meant to be transformative and does not intend to remove people from becoming citizens. The argument that I'm making is not to amend the Constitution. It only fulfills the Constitution. The provision remains, but the interpretation that we gave it, minimizing that clause to mean black, is just simply wrong. The clause remains intact, but I want to elevate the meaning of that clause from race to origin, from exclusion to unity, from fear to harmony. The true strength of the Negro descent clause lies in its universality. It tends to bring all humanity together under the doctrine that Africa is the cradle of humanity. Humanity began in Africa. It affirms that all human beings share a common African ancestry and that citizenship in Liberia is open to all who accept this truth and meet the law's requirements. The strength of our Constitution is basically to ensure that people accept the truth that all human beings have a common African ancestry. If you can acknowledge that, or you can prove that, or you can confirm or affirm, you come under the Constitution. You meet the rest of the requirement, you become a citizen of Liberia. Simple as that. Liberia's Constitution, properly understood, does not divide humanity, it reconciles it. Let me close on this. I think we're pretty close to an hour now. But let me close on this. Where others use race to dominate, as was the case during the days of slavery in the late 19th century, or the early 19th century, when our people moved to Liberia, where others in America and Europe and other places were using race to dominate, Liberia's transformative approach was to use race, or use the origin, to unite. Where the world fractured humanity into colors like white, black, Liberia remembers the beginning. So we have our Constitution that is very assertive, that brings the critical issue that will remind the rest of the world to have a change in thought. We should appreciate our Constitution and that clause within our Constitution, rather than use the clause to denigrate Liberia as a racist country. Liberia is not a racist country. There is no court interpretation of what that clause means. People are basically trying to interpret that on their own. And the interpretation that they gave is flawed. So this young man has picked up on this interpretation and he's giving it to the world. That's a bad representation of Liberia, and we ought to make sure that we put up a defense for our country as not being a racist country. The statement in the Constitution is a statement of history. The statement in the Constitution is a statement of facts. The statement in the Constitution is a statement of reconciliation, a call to reconciliation. And we should appreciate our uniqueness as a country, which represents the argument that the black man was man enough and no less a human being. And that argument still remains valid today. That is why the Constitution will require anybody who wants to become a Liberian citizen to admit the common ancestry of all human beings and assert that I too am of Negro descent. That is the argument. On this note, I want to remind every one of you that we are going to be engaging very soon, beginning February. Our senior brothers who trailblazed multi-party democracy and supported African liberation since the 60s, 70s, and 80s. We are going to be talking to the likes of Dr. Tobana Tipote, Diotran Ramesi, Dr. Josh Klekie. We're going to be talking to D. Kankala, Milton Tiaji, and we are going to be talking to many folks from PAL and Moja, asking the critical question and ensuring that they speak to our young people and they speak to Liberia and they speak to Liberia's future. The Progressive Diary is coming your way very soon. I would say look out for the Progressive Diary, and we are going to have a very fascinating show come February. And what you can do is to like, share, and click on the notification bell so that whenever we are streaming, you are going to be notified and you are going to join and watch the program live. Vote 24 TV is a progressive media institution that tends to engage in the Liberia intellectual space to make sure that we bring harmony to the discourse around, to make sure that we do not leave our country to intellectual polarities. There must be a time that we can kind of synthesize the argument across the aisle. So, like we always say, and my brother Bawa Branel will always say, there has to be a tail force. Between the political extremities in Liberia, there has to be a tail force, a force that kind of bring all of our intellectual minds to appreciate our country and say there is a space for professionalism and in the midst of politics, and the professional space is not going to be eclipsed by political clutches and submit or constrict every one of us into being a partisan of one party or the other before we can survive. This is utterly wrong. Liberia belongs to every one of us, and those of you out there who think that we have to submit to the whims and caprices of political parties simply because we want to survive, you are dead wrong. Liberia has to create a space for the professionals to thrive and for the professionals to do their work. Let me leave you with the Progressive Diary intro.